For oral answer. I call on the adjourned debate on the motion for an address in reply.
Adjourned debate on motion for an address in reply to His Excellency the Governor-General's speech from the throne and the amendment proposed thereto.
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, today marks the beginning of the new parliamentary
Point of order,
term.
the Honourable Trevor Millard.
That's an early start.
Well, Mr Speaker, and I am aware, of course, that calling is a matter that's entirely your discretion, sir. My understanding was that in this debate to date, the government had followed the Labor Party, that there were government speakers at the end of the last debate, and therefore, sir, it should not yet be a government call.
Order, and forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding of the standing orders is that if a member moves the adjournment of the debate previously, then that member has the opportunity to have first call when the debate is resumed. And it's Standing Order 130. I've just been advised, and it was the Honourable Jerry Brownlee who moved the adjournment of the debate, and that's why the Honourable Jerry Brownlee has the right to first call. He doesn't have to take it, but he sought the call, and at least that's my advice, that it was the Honourable Jerry Brownlee who did that, and that's why I've given him first call when he sought it. I assure the honourable member it was not any departure from alternative arrangements.
So the normal process, I understand, then, is that you do call it an interrupted speech.
My advice is that's not the normal situation. The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, just for clarity, it was me who moved the adjournment debate. It was Mrs Tolley who spoke in the adjournment debate. Quite a different matter. There may have been a confusion on the other side of the House. Mr Speaker, today marks the beginning of the second term, parliamentary term, for the re-elected National-led government. And, Mr Speaker, it's very interesting to note today the dynamic of the House completely belies the claims that have been made by the new leader of the Labor Party about taking a completely different approach to politics under his leadership. Mr Speaker, the government set out a strong program read from the throne by the Governor-General, Her Majesty's representative, and that, sir, is a program that is designed to ensure that New Zealand does make significant progress measured by the better lives of New Zealanders over the years ahead. Mr Speaker, while there will be people in this House who, for their own convenience, will want to sit there screaming out, it had no policy, it had no vision, it had no this, they are the same people, sir, who have been consistent in their political ability to move with the times, and I would expect, sir, that they might begin to exhibit some of those skills in the years ahead as the national-led government forges ahead with its program. Mr Speaker, one of the contentious issues that we are facing is the question of the mixed ownership model. Now, I have no difficulty, and my party has no difficulty, with the sort of discussion that we are getting over Section 9 of the SOE Act. That is to be expected. It's quite reasonable, and it's one of those points of difference that will be discussed and will be, I think, elegantly sorted out. And I know that the Minister of Finance has committed himself to a great deal of time to ensure that all New Zealanders understand fully exactly what those issues are. And it won't matter how many times Mr Harawira or any of those on the left who want to suddenly march alongside him try and make a bigger case of it. It is what it is, a perfectly reasonable part of the debate. The prime question, though, is about the decision to extract a little bit more capital out of those assets for the state to use in other things. And what I find is most extraordinary is that the Labor Party will sit over there crowing about the fact that they started KiwiSaver, which has seen the export of thousands, or actually millions and millions of New Zealanders' dollars and their capital into foreign markets to buy foreign shares, but the same opportunity being given to New Zealanders to buy blue chip stock here in New Zealand is to them somehow found to be abhorrent and unacceptable. Mr Speaker, no one should forget that they were the group who presided over the massive losses suffered by so many particularly elderly New Zealanders, as the finance sector went out of control in this country, completely unchecked by ministers who failed to understand what those companies were up to and repeatedly listened to their own advice on what needed to be done to stem some of the wild claims that those companies were making. Mr Speaker, their credibility in this area is absolutely zero, and no one should be moved by the sort of silly get out in front of a parade and wave a flag nonsense that David Shearer appears to be leading the Labour Party towards. It was interesting to note in his reply to the speech from the throne, the first 5 to 10 minutes indicated a new approach. But then straight away a slot back into the old loser politics that saw Labour so well dealt to in the 2011 election. And I want to say to Labour members who repeatedly say we want to act in a more bipartisan way, start acting that way if you want to be respected for that decision. Because at the moment, what we're seeing essentially is a knocking at the door, a pressing the window, a demand to be let into the room to be part of the decision-making so that they can run outside and work out how to attack you even better. Mr Speaker, it's not our job to be the opposition. It's their job. And if they want to be the opposition, then they should be. If they want to be government, or they want to be part of government decision-making, then they need to behave in a far better way than we've seen not only before the election but post it as well. And Mr Speaker, I do speak about some of the issues in Christchurch in that regard as well. Mr Speaker, there is no doubt that New Zealanders have an expectation that a government will do what it can to make their lives better. And this government is not in any way shirking from that. And one of the things that's sort of fascinating is the Labour government, the Labour Party, should I say, saying that if they were in government, they could achieve all sorts of things without making any hard decisions. Mr Speaker, we, for example, have recognised that if New Zealanders, young New Zealanders, are to have the very best education system in the world, then they need to have the very best of facilities in which they are taught. And that, sir, is going to mean that over the next few years, facilities in schools are going to have to massively improve. It's no good just putting in the broadband, which I'll speak about in a few minutes. There has to be a capacity to take full advantage of that. And we have committed in the statement to the House, in the address from the throne, to $1 billion from that future investment fund being put into not only building new schools but modernising all schools so that they are fit to deliver 21st century education to our young people. But if you listen to the other side of the House, sir, they'll believe that you just pluck that out of the sky somewhere and put it into place at absolutely no cost. Mr Speaker, if it comes to a choice between holding a majority, 100% of a particular asset, then Mr Speaker, and choosing to have lesser quality schools for our young people, therefore a lesser investment in the future of this country, then I know which side of the fence I sit on. Mr Speaker, the government is also committed to increasing or improving the infrastructure for our transport in this country. And over the next 10 years, we've said that the state highway network, the local roads network, etc., needs to have some $12 billion worth of investment. That, sir, is a huge amount, and it will make a difference to those economies. Anyone who goes to Auckland will know that the Waterview connection is a very smart piece of infrastructure that will massively improve traffic flows in that city. We've also, sir, got the problem of Kiwi Rail. I say the problem of Kiwi Rail because it does not operate at a maximum of its potential at the present time. But the government is committed to the turnaround program, and that also has to be funded from somewhere. And then, sir, there is the very, very big commitment of $5.5 billion to this point for the rebuild of Christchurch. Christchurch, sir, is around about 15 to 20% of the New Zealand economy, with a massive potential to increase in the future. And while, sir, there will be huge stimulus that comes in from the total $20 billion that will be spent there over the next few years, there's no doubt that beyond that growth that comes from that initial rebuild input, there is a need for greater levels of economic activity in that area. To that regard, the government's commitment to irrigation and to assisting people to put up those projects, and then our commitment to ensure that the resource management project taking full consideration for all environmental matters, does deliver the opportunity to build those sort of projects, to get the sort of growth that the province needs, and frankly, sir, this country desperately needs. Mr. Speaker, I want to just mention the consequence, I guess, of the earthquakes in Christchurch, the biggest being the way in which New Zealand prepares itself for future events of catastrophic nature. And in New Zealand, they say you live with your risk. Some parts of the country very earthquake prone, others flood prone. Auckland has the potential for a volcano, as well as being considerably exposed in the event of any tsunami. And we can sit, as they are on the other side of the House, and laugh about that and say, well, it may never happen, or it probably will never happen. Well, I would hope it doesn't. I would hope it doesn't. Well, I wasn't talking to you, Mr. Cosgrove. You showed very few emotions at any time. I was talking to Mr. Mallard, who's behind you, finding these things somewhat amusing. But what I would say is that no one can be certain in saying that we should just put these things on the long finger. But it is going to mean change for a lot of New Zealanders. It is going to be a big cost in our economy. You cannot escape the fact, sir, that changes to the way in which an insurance market views Christchurch will filter through to the rest of the country as well. So we're going about things down there in a very considered fashion, not being knee-jerked into fast decisions, but at the same time not taking so long as to be unreasonable in making sure that the province and the capital city of that province does have a future. Mr. Speaker, I think the government's program is comprehensive. I think it very clearly points towards the sort of growth that New Zealanders would expect, and New Zealanders will also be able to see in a very short time that the continuation of the national-led government will be very much to their advantage and make sure, sir, that their lives are better for the future.
Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There is a rumour going around, actually, that Jerry Brownlee